Hi team, today we will learn an anchor fact of Russian history that will help you to understand why at Knowable World we refer to Russia as a post-communist culture. At Knowable World, history is the revelation and explanation of the world we live in. That means we don't just study the past, we learn how the past brought us all the way to where we are now. We learn how the past is the most powerful tool for helping us to understand the present. Today's Russia, the Russia that invaded its neighbor, Ukraine, in 2022, is a country that has lost its way because it used to champion a form of government called communism. It abandoned communism in 1991, which is the focus of an upcoming lesson, but today we'll take a look at how it became communist in the first place. The answer is the Russian Revolution of 1917. Since the Russian Revolution happened during and because of World War I, a European war that Russia was caught up in, let's review how Russia became part of Europe in the first place. What we know of Russia so far is that it began as a country isolated to the east of Europe, circa 862. Since it had contact with Constantinople, the one great Roman city that had survived the fall of Rome, Russia was swayed by Orthodox Christianity around 988. Southern Russia was largely occupied by the Mongols from 1240 to 1480, until the Russians of the north saved it and Ukraine and drove out the Mongols. When Russia was visited by English explorers Willoughby and Chancellor, its leaders began to see the value of European culture, and its Tsar, Peter the Great, kicked the door into Europe during the Great Northern War from 1700 to 21. The problem for Russia was that being a part of Europe involved both the positives of trade and cultural influence, and the negative of war. Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, as we saw last time, forcing Russians to use scorched earth tactics to survive. That was the first of what the Russians called Great Patriotic Wars, needed to defend Russia from Europe. After that, Russia started losing a string of smaller wars to European countries, and its people became frustrated. By the time of World War I, from 1914 to 19, which Russians think of as the Second Great Patriotic War, many Russians no longer trusted their czars to lead the way. They wanted a change. But why was Russia involved in World War I? Let's take a look at Europe just before the war. The most powerful country in Europe in 1914 was the German Empire. Germany's neighbors, Austria-Hungary and Italy, decided that the best way to avoid trouble with Germany was to become its allies. They formed an alliance called the Triple Alliance in the heart of Europe. The response by France, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and Russia was to form an alliance of their own, which was called the Triple Entente. The war involving all these allies was at first simply known as the Great War, and only later came to be known as World War I. It was triggered by the terrorist attack that killed the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in 1914. This involved Russia because Russia decided to get involved to defend the people known as Slavs, one of whom was responsible for that attack against the leader of Austria-Hungary. Russia, which also had many Slavs, wanted to defend these people against Austria-Hungary. But when Russia threatened Austria-Hungary not to attack the Slavs, Austria's leaders asked their ally Germany for help. Germany not only agreed, but it attacked Russia and its allies and thereby started the Great War. Russia did so badly in World War I that its people were in a panic. Somewhere around 9 million Russians were killed or wounded, and the people back home were starving because all the supplies were going to the army. The question on everybody's mind was, what is to be done? Which meant, in this case, how do we catch up to Europe, especially Germany? The man who claimed to have the answers was Vladimir Lenin. It was Lenin who brought communism to Russia when the Tsar of Russia abdicated, which means he renounced the throne. Russia's leaders could not agree what to do, but Lenin had most of the workers and soldiers on his side, so he was able to take over. Lenin claimed that to create progress, there should be no private property, and that everyone should be forced to work for the common good, according to the phrase, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." Many people think this is a good idea because they believe it makes everyone equal. But you can only do it by taking away people's freedom. And the result is that everyone does become equally poor. It's strange because in many ways, the Russian Revolution was started by people not having enough food in World War I. And then during the entire period of communism in Russia, people had to stand in line just to get bread. There was never enough. Clearly, communism did not solve anything. At Knowable World, we study things like the horrors of communism in Russia, where millions died of starvation, in China, where tens of millions died in the same way, and in Cuba, where the people still have communism and are so miserable that they build boats out of trucks to try to escape to America. We see that the results of communism in history are always terrible. For now, what we know is that Russia became communist because of the Russian Revolution, and we'll be ready to study more of the story of communism in the upcoming mini lessons. See you then.